Donald Trump wants to build a strategic altcoin reserve. And if you ask me, that's an absolute disaster. But it's still critical for Bitcoin, and we need to take a look at it now. What's going on here? Because indirectly, the next piece of the puzzle is being put in place here to push through the Bitcoin reserve strategy here. But there's a very, very big catch here. Because with a strategic altcoin reserve, it could really be the case that Donald Trump's own bags are being pumped here. And it's not about that here. It's about taking the US to a new level. It's not about giving more sovereignty, more freedom, or more independence, but it could actually just be about pumping up his own altcoin holdings. And we really need to dive into this today. We're here. The differences are between Bitcoin and between Bitcoin. What's the difference between crypto? What's the difference between Bitcoin? Additionally, Cynthia Lummis has sent a request to the US Marshals, so to the US authorities. Bitcoin is supposed to be sold here. It's about the 70,000. Bitcoin, that's also extremely critical. What's currently going on here, I have nothing against it. If some people are getting excited about the Ripple price increases or whatever, I have no problem with that at all. But if we build a strategic Bitcoin reserve here, then we basically have a long-term vision. Assets, holding them for 50 years, 100 years, or even longer, just like with gold or something like that. And in the end, you just don't bet on any assets like that, where you don't know if they'll even be around in 5, 6, 7, or 8 years. I mean, all these altcoin projects are nice and all, and they're cool attempts. And maybe 1 or 2 use cases could come out of that. But with Bitcoin, we have absolute decentralization. Only with Bitcoin do we have the absolute promise of scarcity. And with all the other altcoin projects, there are some companies behind them, some initiators, some bosses, some gurus. And in the end, that's what's happening here. Highly problematic, almost criminal, you could almost say. Criminal might be a bit of a stretch. But let's take a look, because this is really extremely critical. And for Bitcoin, this is really, really crucial. What's happening here right now? It says here in a post that Trump is open to the idea of a reserve system with coins founded in the USA. So if any altcoin projects were founded here in the USA, it says here that many in the cryptocurrency community are cheering for pro-crypto executive orders that Trump is likely to issue. Does an idea spark more controversy? The idea of a strategic US reserve model that would prioritize digital coins, that would be founded in the USA like Solana USD Coin and Ripple. Insiders who want to remain anonymous expressed concerns that this could delegitimize efforts to promote Bitcoin, since it's supposed to be the preferred investment. So the Bitcoin reserve is basically being massively weakened, because Donald Trump is also going massively here. It's ridiculous to go with a strategy like that. I mean, like I said, nothing against Solana, Ripple, and so on. But even the Ripple fans and even the Solana fans are sure about this. That this isn't really a reserve asset or anything like that. Solana or Ripple isn't really meant for that, to basically set up a strategic Ripple reserve or a strategic Solana reserve or something like that. But there's also criticism coming from the Bitcoin community. Here it says, for example, because Clementi, I'm sorry, but in my opinion, the reserve should only consist of Bitcoin and maybe to a lesser extent stablecoins through US Treasury bonds to secure the future of the United States. It seems like Trump has been made aware of this by some people who whispered in his ear. So Clementi wants to be criticized. That also says that Donald Trump has an advisory team, and that advisory team, it influences him again. He's always getting invited to some shitcoin stories. Now there's a meeting with Michael Saylor tomorrow. But there are also a few shitcoin guys in the mix. Mike Novogratz, who's there. I think he has a Terra Luna tattoo on his arm. Then the Coinbase CEO is also there. He's definitely involved with his shitcoins and all that. As I said, no attack against shitcoins and so on. But you really have to differentiate here. Are we building a strategic Bitcoin reserve here, or are we just investing in a few shitcoins and doing some shitcoin flipping or something like that? So you really have to make a clear distinction here. But there are also people like David Bailey who clearly say here that this is here. What's fake is that these rumors being spread here are definitely not true, because David Bailey has been in direct contact with Donald Trump. David Bailey is also the one who published that Donald Trump has a significant amount of Bitcoin holdings. And David Bailey is also the one who basically organized the Nashville Bitcoin Conference. And he clearly says, these are here. Fake news. There's even Matt Cratter, who has a Bitcoin YouTube channel. It even goes further. He says here, the Fed should print $30 trillion and buy XRP. It's the best way to kill multiple birds with one stone. The Fed, the US government, the US dollar, and XRP. The Fed, the US government, the US dollar, and XRP. I want every single less fortunate person, market participants in the world, to own as much XRP as possible. And this is not a serious post. It's actually a satirical one. So basically, he's making the argument that a lot of Bitcoin is always being brought in when it comes to the first nation that will print Bitcoin and do it massively. With the newly printed money buying Bitcoin, they're going to benefit massively. And he's taking it to the next level. And he says, hey guys, we don't need to print money to buy Bitcoin, but we need to print money to buy Ripple. But of course, that's just meant to be satirical. Because in the end, he knows, and a lot of other people know too, that it doesn't make any sense. Here, printing your own money and then buying Ripple. But what really happens here in the end, that there might be a personal interest involved. So if we really take a look, what kind of people are around Donald Trump? Then there are also shitcoins in the mix. And of course, they want to push their own bags. That means they're doing influence Donald Trump. Unfortunately, Donald Trump himself owns a lot of Bitcoin. So I think Donald Trump, there was also something like that. Portfolio leaks, that's where you could see. He only has Bitcoin now. And just recently, this was published here by David Bailey, that Donald Trump also has large Bitcoin holdings. Nobody knew that before. We only knew that David has large altcoin holdings. But I'd say, as much as we criticize here, you can also take something positive from it. Because if Donald Trump is planning an altcoin reserve strategy, then he definitely needs to have a Bitcoin strategy here as well. That means even if Bitcoin is involved, it will still be positive for Bitcoin, because you can't create an altcoin reserve. You can't have an altcoin portfolio without having Bitcoin. You can't have an altcoin portfolio either without having Bitcoin. You always start with Bitcoin first. Bitcoin is basically the flagship. And then if you want to gamble or something, you just take a small altcoin position or something like that. So I'm not a fan of that. But if someone wants to do that, then they should just go ahead and do it, and so on. And you can see it similarly here. So at least he has indirectly laid the next piece of the puzzle here. For the reserve strategy in the US that Bitcoin is being bought here, the game theoretical problem that you only have with the step that the other nations would then perhaps laugh at. I mean, just look at Putin. He would probably laugh at Donald Trump because Putin knows exactly that Bitcoin can't be stopped. That Bitcoin can't be stopped. Putin said Bitcoin can't be stopped. But Putin is also smart enough to know that certain Bitcoins can definitely be stopped because there are just foundations behind it, because there are central points of attack and so on. So I'm not saying that an altcoin can just be dismissed or easily taken down, but you can take down altcoins. Bitcoin is very, very hard to take down because only Bitcoin has the decentralized structure, and no other altcoin has this decentralized structure. And then something really relevant happened here, which is also very, very important on top of that. With Senator Cynthia Lummis, she clearly understands that we need a Bitcoin reserve strategy, not an altcoin reserve. And that's why she has now made a request to the US government. It says here, the US government can no longer deny the value of Bitcoin and digital assets. That's costing taxpayers billions. US dollar. I sent a letter to the US Marshal Service. I sent a letter and asked why they plan to sell almost 70,000 Bitcoin. Almost 70,000. Selling Bitcoin. So she wants to get straight to the point here. She doesn't just want to know why the 70,000 Bitcoin is being sold, but she also wants to know what the situation is here, what the plan actually is, how the castle solution is, what the bigger vision behind the US Bitcoin holdings ultimately is. And what comes to light here is really impressive. Or rather, nothing has come to light yet, but things are already being published here. This here. Then they'll probably be asked again, and eventually an answer will come, or something like that. So Cynthia Lummis is definitely in the Bitcoin camp here. She says to sell gold to build up Bitcoin reserves. But she's also very aware that having an altcoin reserve doesn't make sense. And in the letter, she actually wants to know the following. First of all, current holdings and transparency. So how much is the total Bitcoin supply currently under the control of the US Marshal Service? That already implies that here the exact Bitcoin amount isn't even known, because if the exact Bitcoin holdings were known, then you wouldn't have to ask a question like that. She also asks, why wouldn't this information be made available to the public in a transparent, up-to-date, and online accessible format? So here she basically says the same thing, why aren't you being transparent with your numbers? Here she's already implying that the entire Bitcoin holdings of the US aren't really known. What internal protocols are there for the tracking and managing these holdings? That's what she wants to know here as well. Then it also touches on the decision-making processes. So what specific factors lead to the decision to carry out the liquidation at this time? Ultimately, that's the question, why sell Bitcoin now? Then it also touches on the decision-making processes. So what specific factors lead to the decision to carry out the liquidation at this time? That's basically the question, why sell Bitcoin now? Germany has regretted selling the Bitcoin in hindsight. So it wasn't really a smart move to sell Bitcoin here. I mean, in the long run, when you look at it from a 10-year or 5-year perspective or something like that, is actually almost never a good one. That's, let's say, the time to sell Bitcoin. She wants to know exactly, why are you selling it? The official statements are something like, Bitcoin is too volatile or something like that. But in my opinion, those are just superficial arguments because you don't hold a strategic reserve, a Bitcoin strategic reserve, for just 2 months. Then I could accept that argument. On a 2-month basis, maybe Bitcoin volatile. But you hold a Bitcoin strategic reserve, or not just a strategic reserve, but generally assets in the treasury. Maybe for 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30 years. Okay. And then, seriously, the volatility isn't really a problem here at all. And that's why this is a very, very good demand that she has. She also says here, the government's stated policy regarding a national Bitcoin reserve is taken into account in this decision-making process. So she's also addressing the Bitcoin reserve here. And she asks, hey guys, do you even know that if you sell the Bitcoin now, we'll have to buy it back in 3 or 4 days? Because Donald Trump is planning a strategic reserve here. And that's basically crazy that almost here Bitcoin is sold and then 2 weeks later you might buy the Bitcoin back. And she really asks some very, very good questions. She also asks, for example, what lessons would be learned from previous sales. Unrealized. Values of over $18 billion led to that. So they say, yeah, just like in Germany here, massive. Unrealized gains would be missed when you sold Bitcoin here in the past. And now she just asks what lessons would be learned from that. And I mean, then you can really only, let's say, draw the lesson from it. Buy the fucking dip, buy Bitcoin, hold it forever, never sell it. Like Michael Saylor. Or you can, of course, sell Bitcoin. As an individual or whatever, but as a nation state, it really doesn't make much sense to sell Bitcoin. Just like you wouldn't really sell gold or anything like that. That means you hold gold, you hold Bitcoin, and then here it goes on. In terms of strategic planning, the Marshal Service has a comprehensive strategy for dealing with Bitcoin and assets, and so on. Then she just asks about the background, then timing and transition. Is the US Marshal Service planning to sell Bitcoin before the transition to new administrations? That's a very, very relevant question, because that's basically what a lot of people were afraid of. Whether Donald Trump might be manipulated by Biden here, because he's just selling off all the Bitcoin assets here. So really, really good questions, if you ask me. And there will probably be even more transparency. What's happening here comes up in the whole story. I'm going to show you. Again, real quick, the view in Paraguay here. By the pool back here, just chilling. Let's fucking go. But I'm actually not going in because there's too much chlorine in there for me. Jumped in here yesterday. Then I spent the whole evening and night gulping down chlorine. I'm not feeling that anymore. I'll drop a link down below for you. 21 Bitcoin, where you can easily buy Bitcoin. Absolutely super simple for beginners and advanced users. It's really super easy. Here, with the code Bitcoin Hotel, you can still get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. I gotta keep moving quickly here. It's really hot here in Paraguay. It's 104 degrees here. Shout out to the snowy regions here in Germany, Austria, Switzerland. See you later. See you later. Peace out.